All right, great. Welcome to the Oxygenaddict Podcast. I'm very happy to have with us today on the show Andrew Messick, the CEO of Ironman. Andrew, welcome aboard. It's been quite a week for you and everybody at Ironman headquarters, hasn't it?
It's been quite a couple of months ever since Kona in the beginning of October. But yes, last week was eventful.
So let's kick off with that then. First up, as a fan, as a coach, I was really impressed with the way the 2-day Kona worked this year. Feedback that I heard from athletes that both raced and watched was almost universally positive, especially around the angle of the women really getting to have their own World Championships highlighted and it not kind of being mixed up amongst the men's race. How was your view on that as a CEO of Ironman?
I mean, from a racing perspective and from the perspective of looking after, our athletes and volunteers and friends and families, it was fantastic. We had done a lot of work to make sure that the courses were going to work and that we were going to have traffic management plans that were going to be able to adjust for a lot of the things that were new with Kona in 2022, and that were really a reflection of us racing on a Thursday. Back in the day, if you look at the energy lab on the run course, it was its own sort of unique thing. Now Nelha is a legitimate business park that has 400 people that go to work there every day, plus visitors and customers and all of that stuff. And so by racing on a Thursday, we had to do a whole bunch of stuff that we're not accustomed to having to do when we typically race on Saturdays. And so managing not just our athletes to be able to get in and out, but employees to be able to get in and out, and customers and all of that. And so I think the team, which is Kona based under Diana Birch's leadership, I thought did an exceptional job working with all of the relevant constituencies, the hotels, the airport, all of those people, to be able to allow, for people to accommodate the race and still be able to work. And so that whole process was a huge effort, and it was largely invisible to our athletes, which is what it should be. When you do your job well as a race organizer, the plumbing and the sausage making of how you close roads and manage traffic and do all the things you need to do, we hope that that's invisible to our athletes. And I think that by and large it was, especially on the Thursday, and we were able to deliver a great race, on Thursday and another great race on Saturday. And I agree with you. I thought that the women racing on Saturday really put on a show, and it was, the best women in the world. And there was a whole bunch of them that tried to win and really went for it. And, and if you're a race organizer, that's what you hope for, right? You hope for, a heavyweight championship, the best people in the world, their number one goal, their A game, they're 100% prepared, and they're trying to win. So from that perspective, it was just fantastic.
And it felt also as though, because obviously when the women's race and men's race were on the same day, you had a limited number of motorbikes with cameras out. It feels as though we got to see the racing more in the women's race. I'm not convinced there was more racing going on, but we got to see more of it rather than, the limited view we've perhaps seen in the past.
Well, that's one of the things that you don't know you're sacrificing, but you are sacrificing when you're only racing on one day. You think that you're going to have enough motos to cover the whole race, but the reality is you don't. And if you have, your cameras and your motos focusing, your media motos in any event, focusing just on the men and just on the women, you're able to tell the story dramatically better. And the other thing that I think was really instrumental and will require adjustment is the officiating. And that, typically during Kona or any one-day world championship, you've got a certain number of officials who are patrolling. If you're just talking about the officials that are assigned to the professional race, they are patrolling an area from the lead man to generally the last woman. And on a one loop course, there's a lot of real estate in there, miles and miles and miles of terrain between the front of race one and the back of race two. And I think our athletes are accustomed to a certain amount of density of officials and how frequently officials are going to be around them at any particular point in time. And when you separate the men's and the women's race, suddenly you've got the same number of officials patrolling a much, much smaller space, and they're able to officiate the race more carefully. And we saw that for both the men and the women. And it's going to be one of those things as we think about, the continued, individual day of racing, that the athletes are going to have to adjust for that. That there's, even with the same number of officials, there's more officiating for any one particular athlete.
It's an interesting point. There were certainly some athletes who were fairly aggrieved over social media after the events, but it's interesting to hear a different point of view that there's going to be more officiating going on and people are going to be watched more, and maybe athletes have to adjust to that as well. That's something I have to admit I hadn't considered. So it's fairer racing. There's the same number of officials seeing twice as many athletes in a smaller area. So yeah.
So okay, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think fairer racing is better for everybody. When did it become apparent to you then that having finished the race in Kona and thought this was wonderful, our perspective certainly from viewers was this was wonderful, two separate races. How were things on the ground during Kona? When did it become apparent that things were perhaps not as well received by the locals as you would have hoped?
Well, the thing we always worried about was the Thursday race. That was always the question mark. It was always the thing that we were going to absolutely have to get right. It was the thing we'd never done before, nor had anyone else really. And so like our antenna were up and vibrating from the very, very beginning about, what is traffic management going to be like? What's the airport going to say? What are the hotels on the Kala Coast going to say about their ability to get guests to and from the airport and to and from excursions? What are the people who work in town going to say? Are construction workers going to be able to get to their job sites? And we've done a ton of work notifying the community so that people knew this event was going to happen. And we were really hopeful that we were going to be able to communicate effectively enough so that people would, if they didn't need to be moving around the west side of the island on Thursday, they wouldn't. But it was pretty clear by Thursday night, by the time we'd closed the bike course, that people were pretty unhappy. And over the course of the weekend, I sat next to Mayor Roth at the welcome banquet. I was, part of the awards presentation with him on Thursday. I was part of the awards presentation with him on Saturday. I sat next to him on Sunday at the awards banquet. I spent a lot of time with him and other representatives of the county and the town. And it was clear, even on Thursday, that we were getting more feedback from the community than we were either expecting or hoping for. And we've always had, a relationship with Kona. We've been there for 40 years. And there's always been a pact that in return for the benefits of more people and more tourism and more economic activity, the community is prepared to deal with the road closures and people riding bikes 4 abreast all over the place and all of that. And the feedback we were getting is that that balance was not there. And that, we did have 2 days of racing. We did have twice as many athletes in town that did, they all had to eat. They all ate in restaurants. They, stayed in hotels. Many of those hotels were, dramatically more expensive than they historically had been. But less of that benefit filtered down to the people who were trying to get to their job at the airport on Thursday, and they weren't getting paid time and a half, and they were sitting in an hour and a half traffic jam, and they did not like it. And
yeah,
and so what was clear certainly by Sunday was that we had real conversations we needed to have with the county and the town and the mayor about whether this was right for Kona. And we've always prided ourselves on being a part of the community, and we were super active during that pandemic, and we gave we gave away $1 million of Ironman Foundation money to feed families in need in West Hawaii. And we've always been proud of the role we've played in the community. And what became clear in the days and weeks after the race, and it became clear through official channels, feedback from constituents to the mayor and to the town. But we've got a bunch of people who live there too. And our team, both our volunteers and our employees, got a lot of feedback. They got it at church, they got it at the grocery store, they got it at school where their kids are. And the feedback they got was, no. And we're supportive of Ironman. We love Ironman. Ironman's been a good citizen, but Thursday, too much. And look, we didn't like hearing it. We didn't want to hear it. We already had 23 on sale. We were hopeful that 2 days of racing in 23 was a done deal. But there is a reality on the ground. And that reality on the ground is you can't be in the event business where you're operating in public waterways, on public roads, in communities. You need permits to be able to ply your trade. And if there is real organized opposition to you being there, you can be out of business. And that's a balance that we know and we manage at every race everywhere in the world. You have to be always taking the temperature of the community, and you have to be making sure that the benefits that accrue by having your races there, either reputational or economic, are balanced with the inconvenience that your race creates to people who live there, who are trying to get to church, trying to get to school, trying to drop their kids off at piano lessons. And if that balance gets out of whack, you got real problems. And so the feedback that became really clear in the month of October was that 2 days was just not going to work. And we talked about, okay, Thursday, Saturday doesn't work. What if you race Saturday and Saturday? What if you do one race on the second Saturday in October, and then you do another race some other time? And the feedback to that was, guys, this is from the community. Listen, we like one day a year where the Ironman show comes to town. One day.
Yeah.
And if you would like me to tell it to you again, I will tell you one day. And so, it was very frustrating for all of us, because we understand, we get it, and again, we've got people who live there, and they understand, but we had big plans, right? And we liked those big plans, and we were excited about 2 days of racing, and we thought 2 days of racing for the Ironman World Championships, like 2 days of racing for 70.3 Worlds, we really thought it's better. It's better because it does give women their own pure spotlight, which we think is well deserved and totally appropriate. And especially in 2022, where, if you look at these premier top tier level women's events, the European Football Championship for women, in Wembley, and the Rugby World Cup for women in New Zealand just finished, and the Tour de France Femme, like these were all, astonishing showcases for extraordinary female athletes. And like we felt and Chelsea and Annie and Lucy and, Laura Phillip and Lisa Norden and, Fenella Langridge and everybody else. I mean, like those women like put on a show.
It was a great race, and we got to see it because it was a woman's only race. And I think you're right. We wouldn't have seen that if it had been mixed up in the men's race.
No,
we wouldn't have seen as much of it.
It would have been an afterthought. I don't want to say an afterthought because our team never treats the women's race like an afterthought. But you've only got a certain number of motos, and if they're, and if the bulk of your motos are at the front of the men's race, they are not, they're not 30 kilometers away watching what's happening in the back of the women's pack. And there just
a lot
is
of the
no way
feedback
about it.
I've heard from female pros is they loved being at the front of their own race. They loved the crossing the line first aspect of it. It was fantastic. And I have to say, I think it's a really bold move, but really applaudable that you've made the decision to keep the women's race in Kona for next year and move the men's race somewhere else. That, I think, says more than 1,000 advertising campaigns could do, talking about and I know not everyone's going to agree with it, but talking about the importance of raising the women's sport. That's action, not talk, right there.
Yeah, and I think we think it's appropriate, and it's, if you go all the way back to 1979 in Lynn Lemaire, in the second year being the first woman, we've like our history in sort of the advancement of women's sport is one we're really proud of. And if you look even today, there are different rules for men's and women's ice hockey. There are different rules for men's and women's lacrosse. At the majors, women play best of 3 sets, men play best of 5. In golf, the women's play from the ladies' tees. We've never had any of that at Ironman. There's one distance, there's one set of cutoffs. Everybody, you make it or you don't. And if you look around the landscape, I mean, has there ever been a UCI road race where the men and women have raced the same distance? Never. Time trial, women's always shorter. It's only until a couple of years ago that even, World Athletics had, the cross country championship be the same distance for men and women. And for us, women have always been treated exactly the same. And when we introduced pro prize money in 1986, equal prize money for men and women, from the beginning, we didn't care what gender you were. It was whether you could do it or whether you couldn't. And so it always bothered us that in a one-day world championship scenario, you're just necessarily subsuming the women's race, and they're chasing, they're chasing the male pros, and they're getting chased by the male age groupers. And we always wanted it to be different.
Yeah.
And we made it different in 2017 at 70.3 Worlds, and it's awesome. And so I think, I think it was the right message for us to send, to say, all right, women get their first crack at Kona.
Nice.
And I can't tell you how many guys have been emailing me saying, you're like, I know women should be a part of it, but can't I do it? And I was like, dude, really?
All right. So next question then. Obviously,
Yeah.
this is coming at you very, very fast, but you've faced a lot of criticism in social media and public facing things for why announce that the men's race is moving without telling people where to or when it's going to be. Is that simply a reflection of you don't know yet and you can't confirm it?
Well, we can't confirm it. And I know it's awkward. And again, we wish things were different. But it's worth also recognizing that we all left Kona in the middle of October thinking we were racing 2 days in Kona. And for us to be able to, in 5 weeks, be able to have enough confidence to say we've got another place where we're going to race and that it's going to be terrific, to be able to make that announcement. Again, I said at the very beginning, we try to hide our sausage making from the public to the greatest possible extent because we're in the event business and we want things to seem like they're always going sort of smooth and painless. But it was a huge amount of work for us to be able to say, all right, like, what are we going to do? Are we going to go back to one day at Kona and like rejigger all of the qualifying for all the slots from now till 23 because so many people have already qualified? Are we going to move backwards? Are we going to potentially take 2 days and do it somewhere else? Are we going to like split the World Championships and find a venue? And we wouldn't have announced this unless we had a lot of confidence. And so while we're not able to say where that place is, we will in early January. And we wanted to, at a minimum, not put more people in a position where they were making commitments about where they were going to be in October that we knew weren't going to be right.
Yeah.
And so I fully appreciate it's unsatisfying. And in a perfect world, we would have announced everything all at once. We would have done it a year and a half in advance. But we weren't provided that opportunity. And so we scrambled. And frankly, I think the team, the work the team has done has been extraordinary. But we're asking everybody to bear with us as best they can. And like, I know it's really frustrating. And I know that people are saying, okay, I'm not going to Kona. I've got a Kona slot. I paid for it. I don't know where I am going. Am I racing in 2023? Am I racing in 2024? I get all of that frustration. I really do. And if we'd had 2 years or 2.5 years to plan this, we would have done it all at once, but we had 6 weeks. And
well, that's an interesting lead on. Are you open? Do you have a policy? Are you open to men who've already qualified and taken the slot for Kona 2023? Do they have the option to roll to the race that'll happen in 2024? So I remember I read something that
we're going to let them roll to 24 if they want to.
You will.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
But we're not going to start that process until people have the choice and until people that know what they're giving up. And we're hopeful that people are going to think the 2023 destination is pretty awesome.
You're not going to give us any clues. You can't give us a little spoiler for our little podcast.
Come on.
The rumor is it's going to be Nice.
I mean, look, it's. I don't want to.
Yeah, fair enough. I've got to ask you though. My friends would kill me if I don't ask you.
I understand, but we have partners and we have agreements, and those govern what we do and what we say.
Yeah. So early January is the timeline for people finding out.
That's correct.
That's
and at that point, we'll be in a position to announce rejiggered slots for the 23 World Championship, because we're going to recast everything. One of the things that I don't know whether it's been broadly reported is that for the first time, we're separating men's and women's slots. So historically, Ironman Frankfurt has 75 slots, and they're allocated proportionally. Every age group gets at least one, the rest, and like that whole methodology. We're announcing and part of what we did for women, for the women's race, is we said there's a certain number of women's slots, there's a certain number of men's slots. And we'll recast all those men's slots when we announce the destination for the men for 2023, in order to give an enhanced opportunity for people who are local to that market to be able to compete. We listened about how expensive it was to get to Kona, and how hard it is for a lot of people to take at least a week off of work, and it's 20 hours of travel and it's 12 hours of time, and it's really it's punishing to get to Kona from Europe. And if, for example, let's just assume that the place that we're talking about is sort of more European, that it opens up an opportunity for a bunch of people who either couldn't or don't want to spend the time and money to be able to travel to the other side of the world, but would like an opportunity to race against the best athletes in the world. And so I think we have an opportunity to learn about, what is the appetite for people to qualify for and compete in a world championship that will have the best athletes, but maybe doesn't require, really substantial amounts of money for people to be able to get there. And if that place, for example, has lots of hotel rooms and easy flight lift from major, parts of the world, then, all of a sudden you're dealing with a really different sort of economic package.
Yeah.
Which I think for a segment of people could be really interesting. And I think also it's a different kind of race, and maybe a different type of athlete is able to be really successful there. And, Kona is hot and it's humid and it's windy, and, that's not everybody's cup of tea in terms of optimal performance.
I interviewed Chris McCormack a couple of days ago and asked him his opinion on this. And he said, look, do you know what? A lot of people are going to shoot me down for this, but I love the idea of it being somewhere outside of Kona, because then guys like me would have had a chance to win it more than once or twice, because you're not dealing with the excessive heat and humidity. So I understand there's going to be kickback in the early days, and there's always going to be Kona being the mythical, magical land, but there's also at the pro level this opportunity for other athletes to win whose physiologies are just never going to be suited to Kona.
Yeah, no, I was joking with somebody that it was the kind of thing that would make Marina von Honecker want to come out of retirement.
Hey, he could probably still come back and finish top 5 tomorrow.
Yeah, he probably could, but he's one of those athletes that just for whatever his own physiological makeup just never let him be able to compete at that level there. And I'm sure he's not the only one.
So let me ask you this, our last question for you. You've been CEO for 10, 11 years now of the Ironman Group.
Coming up on 12.
Coming up on 12, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Where do you see Ironman being in 5 years if everything goes to plan?
So I think, what we're trying to do is pretty, there's no sort of magic thing we're trying to do. I think there's a bunch of us in this company who are real true believers, and who, like me, I did my first Ironman in 2005, and the process of doing it changed my life. And so I'm, exhibit A of the people who have the crazy passionate belief in how Ironman can make you better better in everything, and it can expand your horizons and show you that link between effort and reward that we spend our lives trying to teach our children, and that it's this unambiguous force for good. And our culture of athletes, you go to a world championship, and everybody's the same, different genders, different colors, different ages, from different parts of the world, but there's this incredible positive spirit, this positivity, this, you want to help the other guy, you're competing against people, but you're really not competing, because you're all fellow travelers in this incredible, amazing adventure that changes you and changes your life. And like, we're trying to spread that around the world. Like, that's our secret business strategy. Like, we're trying to spread to every single part of the world. Because for so many of us, it's been this amazingly important part of our lives. And so, yeah, I'm trying to get more women involved in the sport. I'm trying to get more people from every corner of the globe involved in the sport. I'm trying to get more young people. I'm trying to get more old people. I'm trying to get more everybody. And that's really what animates us more than anything, and gives us the energy to like do this crazy job, and it is a crazy job, right? Like, the event business is just preposterously difficult. I mean, all you spend your whole life dealing with stuff going wrong. There's a hurricane, there's a mudslide, a bridge collapses. You've got like we're an outdoor event business. You think of everything that can go wrong outdoors. It's a long list. And you pull 20-hour days like at events, but it's awesome. You get to watch people cross the finish line, and that makes everything worth it. So like, more of that. And awesome. and I think also, one of the things that we've historically been is really focused on like being an event delivery company. And we do that, I think, really well. We deliver safe, high quality racing experiences for athletes around the world. And we do this in mountain biking and in running and in triathlon and everywhere where we compete. But I think we've got an opportunity to be more helpful to our athletes, because as one of the things that everybody in the Ironman world knows is that like Ironman athletes care a lot about whatever their upcoming race is, being 100% ready and having the right equipment and being optimally prepared and the right nutrition and the right everything. And we've never really been that involved in an awful lot of that. We've really said, all right, from when they arrive on Wednesday to when they leave on Monday morning, like, that's where we're going to put our effort, and we're in creating like that great experience. But I think there's more that we can do in helping people get to the start line sort of as healthy and as prepared and confident as possible. So I think you'll probably see us do more in that area in the future.
Fantastic. Hey, well, listen, thank you very much for your time. I'm very conscious we've run over here. So how would you like to wrap this up? Is there anything else that you'd like to pass on to the listeners?
Well, we're excited about 2023, and we're excited. A lot of our attention has been thinking about World Championships, but we've got 70.3 Worlds are taking place in Finland in August, and then we've got 2 days and 2 venues of World Championships, and we hope to see a lot of the community there, and we'll be ready.
Fantastic. Andrew Messick, CEO of Ironman, thank you very much for your time.
Happy to be a part of this, Rob.